I thought I was being a hero when I handed over every cent of my life savings to save my dying father-in-law. But while I was mourning a man I thought was on his deathbed, my wife was hiding a devastating secret. The illness wasn't real, and my family's entire future had just been funneled into a massive, calculated scam. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode may touch a story that is still unfolding. Marcus Devereux was not a wealthy man. He was something rarer than that. He was a disciplined man. For 11 years, he had worked double shifts at a logistics company on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan, coming home with sore shoulders and quiet pride, depositing money every single week into a savings account that represented everything he believed a good life could become. A house with a real backyard. A college fund for the children he and his wife Destiny had talked about since the early days of their marriage. A future that did not beg anyone for permission. He was 37 years old. He had built something real. Then the phone rang. It was a Tuesday morning, just before 7 in the morning, when Destiny walked into the kitchen with her phone pressed hard against her ear and her face completely drained of color. Marcus was pouring his coffee. He watched her knees nearly give. He set the cup down before it was even full. She said 4 words. "My father is dying." That was all it took. 4 words and 11 years of careful, quiet sacrifice suddenly had a new purpose. Not a house, not a college fund, not a future. Just a man on a hospital bed somewhere in Detroit, Michigan, who needed emergency surgery or he would not survive the week. The diagnosis, as Destiny relayed it through broken sobs, was aggressive. Terminal, the doctors had reportedly said. A rare cardiac condition that had progressed without warning. The surgery was expensive. The window was closing. Marcus did not sit down and calculate. He did not open a spreadsheet. He did not ask Destiny to wait while he thought it through. That was not who he was. That was not what their marriage meant to him. He reached across the kitchen counter, took her hands in both of his, and told her they were going to fix it. She looked at him with wet eyes and something else, something he would not be able to name until much later. The savings account held $43,000. Every dollar of it had a memory attached. A skipped vacation, an old car driven past its years, a birthday dinner cooked at home instead of a restaurant. Marcus transferred the full amount within 24 hours, routed through an account number Destiny provided from what she described as the hospital's private billing system. He did not question the process. He trusted his wife. That trust was not weakness. It was the most human thing about him. And it was precisely that humanity, that unconditional willingness to sacrifice for the people he loved, that was chosen as the instrument of his destruction. The coffee on the counter went cold. He never finished it. The days that followed the transfer moved slowly, the way days do when a person is waiting for confirmation that they did the right thing. Marcus went back to work. He told no one what he had done. That was also who he was, private, steady, unbothered by the need for recognition. But in the quiet moments between shifts and in the space before sleep, he felt it. The weight of $43,000 gone from an account he had spent over a decade building. It was not regret. He was clear about that inside himself. It was something more like grief. The kind a person feels not because they made the wrong choice, but because the right choice still costs something real. Destiny seemed lighter. She moved around their apartment in northwest Detroit, Michigan, with a kind of relieved energy that Marcus found comforting. She cooked dinner 2 nights in a row, something she had not done in months. She laughed at something on television. She reached for his hand when they sat together on the couch. He told himself this was what it looked like to save a family. At work, Marcus stayed focused. His supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Clifton, noticed that Marcus seemed distracted and asked him once if everything was all right at home. Marcus said yes without elaborating. Clifton nodded and moved on. That was the extent of it. Inside, Marcus was doing quiet math he did not want to admit he was doing. Starting over at 37 was not impossible. He had done it before in smaller ways. He knew how to cut expenses. He knew how to work harder than the next man. The savings were gone, yes, but the discipline that built them was still intact. That could not be transferred. That could not be taken. He held on to that thought the way a man holds on to something in a current. What he did not hold on to, because he had no reason to yet, was suspicion. Destiny had not given him any real reason for doubt. She updated him on her father's condition every day, describing the surgery preparation, the specialist consultations, the careful monitoring. The details were enough to satisfy a man who was not looking for holes. He was not looking for holes. He was looking at his wife across the dinner table in their apartment in Detroit, Michigan, watching her smile return, watching the fear leave her face, and telling himself that $43,000 was a number. Her father's life was not a number. That was the logic of a man in love. And it was airtight, right up until it was not. The last night of that temporary peace, Marcus slept without any trouble. Destiny's breathing beside him was calm and even. The apartment was quiet. Detroit, Michigan outside the window was doing what it always did, moving forward, indifferent, alive. He did not know it was the last peaceful night he would have for a very long time. The first inconsistency was small enough to dismiss. Destiny mentioned that her father, a man named Roosevelt Caldwell, had been moved to a recovery ward on a Friday afternoon. Marcus asked which hospital. Destiny said Riverside Medical. Marcus, without making a production of it, pulled out his phone that same evening and searched for Riverside Medical in Detroit, Michigan. No results matched. He searched again with different terms. He tried surrounding areas. He tried variations of the name. Nothing came back that resembled an operating medical facility anywhere near Detroit, Michigan. He set his phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. There was an explanation. There was always an explanation. Maybe the name was slightly different and Destiny had misremembered it under stress. People did that. People under emotional pressure did not always retain exact names. He had done it himself. He would ask her tomorrow, casually, without alarm. He asked her the next morning over breakfast. Destiny corrected herself smoothly. She said she had meant Northgate General, not Riverside. She said the names of the facilities had blurred together during all the chaos of the past weeks. She smiled when she said it, a small, apologetic smile that looked entirely believable. Marcus accepted it, but the sealing memory stayed with him. 2 weeks after the transfer, Marcus asked if he could visit Roosevelt. He framed it gently, saying that he wanted to show his support and that it felt strange not to have gone yet. Destiny's response came half a second too late. Just half a second, but Marcus felt it. She said that Roosevelt was still in a restricted recovery unit and that the medical team had advised against outside visitors to prevent infection risk. Marcus nodded. He did not push, but something had shifted in the architecture of his thinking. Not a conclusion, not yet, just a door that had not been there before, standing slightly open. The next inconsistency arrived without warning on a Wednesday evening. Destiny's phone buzzed repeatedly while she was in the shower. Marcus was not the kind of man who checked his wife's phone. He had never done it in 6 years of marriage. He believed that privacy inside a marriage was a form of respect, not a red flag. He still believed that when he walked past the phone. He still believed that when he noticed the screen had lit up with a message preview from a contact, saved only as a single letter. He did not read it. He walked to the window instead and looked out at the Detroit, Michigan skyline doing its quiet evening thing. Lights coming on in windows, traffic thinning on the streets below. He stood there for a long time. When Destiny came out of the shower, she picked up her phone immediately, not casually, immediately. She read the message with her back to him and said nothing. Marcus said nothing either, but the door in his mind was no longer just slightly open. He started paying attention differently, not with hostility, not with the frantic energy of a man spiraling. Marcus Devereux paid attention the way he did everything else in his life, methodically, quietly, without announcing himself. He began to notice the shape of things rather than just the surface. Roosevelt Caldwell, according to Destiny, had now survived the surgery and was entering a slow but stable recovery. This was good news. Marcus responded to it the way a relieved husband should. He embraced Destiny. He said he was grateful. He meant both of those things on the surface. Underneath, he was listening for the details. There were none. In 6 years of marriage, Marcus had learned that Destiny was a natural storyteller. She had always narrated her life with texture and color, the small specifics that made stories feel lived in. When she talked about a difficult day at her job as an office coordinator in downtown Detroit, Michigan, she would describe the exact tone of her manager's voice, the brand of coffee in the break room, the way the afternoon light hit the parking lot on the walk to her car. She remembered things. She narrated things. She was not narrating Roosevelt's recovery. Every update came in broad strokes. He is doing better. The doctors are pleased. He is eating more now. They are talking about physical therapy. The words were correct, but they had no weight behind them. They sounded the way a person sounds when they are recalling something they memorized rather than something they witnessed. Marcus filed this away without comment. He made one quiet move. He called Detroit, Michigan's main public hospital directory, presented himself as a family member, and asked whether a patient named Roosevelt Caldwell had been admitted in the past 2 months. The woman on the line ran the name twice. She found nothing. She suggested he try the name with alternate spellings. He did, still nothing. He thanked her and ended the call. He sat in his car in the parking lot of his workplace for 11 minutes before going inside. The question he was now sitting with was not whether something was wrong. That question had already been answered. The question was how wrong and how long and how far back the wrongness actually went. That night at dinner, Marcus watched Destiny with the specific attention of a man who is no longer just a husband at a table. He watched the way she held her fork, the way she answered his ordinary questions, the way she filled silence. She was comfortable. She was not nervous. She was not performing guilt. That was the part that unsettled him most. Not the lies, the ease of them. He cleared the dishes after dinner. He washed them by hand the way he always did. Destiny sat on the couch behind him, laughing softly at something on her phone. He kept washing. He was building something in his mind. A case, not out of anger, out of necessity. Because the man who had handed over 11 years of savings to save a dying father-in-law needed to know with absolute certainty whether that man had ever been dying at all. The phone was on the kitchen counter. It was a Sunday night, just past 10 in the evening, and Destiny had stepped outside onto the building's stairwell to take what she described as a call from her cousin in Atlanta. Marcus was cleaning up after a late dinner. The kitchen in their Detroit, Michigan apartment was narrow and warm, and the overhead light buzzed faintly the way it always did. He was not looking for the phone. He was reaching past it for a dish towel. The screen lit up on its own, triggered by a new message, and the preview sat there for 3 full seconds before going dark again. Marcus did not read the full message. He did not need to. The 4 words visible in the preview were enough to stop the functioning of something inside him. The 4 words were, "She still does not know." He stood with the dish towel in his hand. He did not move for a long time. When Destiny came back inside, she walked directly to the counter and turned her phone face down in one smooth, practiced motion. She asked if there was any of the rice left. Marcus told her there was. She opened the refrigerator. They moved around each other in the kitchen the way married people do, familiar and automatic. He did not say anything about the message. He needed to think before he spoke. That was the most important discipline he owned, the ability to hold a thing inside himself without reacting until he understood it fully. Reacting early would close doors. He needed doors open. He went to bed before Destiny that night, or appeared to. He lay in the dark with his eyes open and reconstructed every conversation about Roosevelt Caldwell from the beginning. He ran through the timeline. He ran through the inconsistencies. He ran through the bank transfer, the untraceable hospital name, the restricted visitor policy, the textureless recovery updates. And now 4 words from an unknown sender on a phone that was always face down. She still does not know. The shape of it was becoming clear. This was not a spontaneous deception. This was not a desperate woman making a panicked decision under pressure. The message implied coordination. It implied there was someone else involved who was tracking what Marcus knew and did not know. It implied that his ignorance had been managed as a resource. He had not been a husband in this situation. He had been a target. That word landed in his chest like something cold. The next morning, before Destiny woke up, Marcus sat at the small desk in the corner of their bedroom where he paid bills and opened his personal laptop. He pulled up the bank records for the account the transfer had originated from and traced every detail available to him. Then he wrote down the receiving account number that had been provided by Destiny on a folded piece of paper he had kept without entirely knowing why. He typed it into a search. What came back was the beginning of the end of everything he thought he knew. The account number led nowhere that a legitimate medical billing system should lead. Marcus had expected to find something traceable to a hospital, a medical group, a licensed healthcare billing company operating somewhere in Detroit, Michigan, or the surrounding region. He was prepared for that. He was even prepared on some level to find a private contractor or a third-party payment processor of the kind that large hospital networks sometimes used. What he found instead was a financial trail that bent in directions no medical emergency required. The receiving account was registered under a limited liability company with a name that sounded clinical and unremarkable: Northgate Health Solutions. Marcus searched the company name against Michigan State business registration records. The LLC had been formed 14 months before Roosevelt Caldwell's supposed medical emergency. 14 months, not in response to a crisis, well before one. The registered agent of that LLC was not Roosevelt Caldwell. It was not Destiny. It was a man named Terrence Ockafer, listed at a residential address in Southfield, Michigan. Marcus did not know that name. He sat with it for a long time. He kept pulling the thread. Northgate Health Solutions had received the $43,000 from Marcus's transfer. Within 72 hours of that deposit, the funds had been redistributed across 3 separate transactions. One transfer went to a personal account. One went to what appeared to be a prepaid card service. The third went to an account registered in a name Marcus recognized immediately. Destiny Caldwell Devereaux. His wife's maiden name combination, attached to an account he had never seen, had never been told about, and had never had any reason to look for. He closed the laptop. He sat in the silence of the apartment in Detroit, Michigan, and he let that fact complete its full journey through him before he did anything else. The money had not saved a life. The money had traveled a practiced, pre-designed route, cycling through a shell company, splitting into pieces, and landing in an account his wife controlled under a name she had kept separate from their marriage. This was not impulsive. This was not a family protecting itself in a moment of panic. This had been structured, designed, executed with the kind of calm that required preparation and rehearsal. The man named Terrence Ockafer was the architecture. Destiny was the delivery mechanism. Marcus was the source. He thought about the morning she had walked into the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear and her face drained of color. He thought about how convincing that color had been, how her knees had nearly buckled, how he had set his coffee cup down and crossed the room without hesitation because that was who he was. That version of her, standing in that kitchen, had been a performance. He had watched it and believed it completely. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at Detroit, Michigan doing its indifferent morning thing. Then he picked up his phone and called a financial crimes attorney whose number he found through a referral from a colleague. He made the appointment for the following morning. He did not tell Destiny. The attorney's name was Dominic Ashford, and his office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Detroit, Michigan, with wide windows that looked out over the city in a way that made everything below appear very small and very manageable. Marcus sat across from him and laid everything on the table, not emotionally, methodically. He presented the transfer record, the LLC registration documents he had printed, the 3 redistributed transactions, and the account in Destiny's maiden name. He spoke in a steady voice and answered Dominic's clarifying questions without digression. Dominic listened without interrupting. He reviewed each document with the attention of a man who had seen versions of this before, who understood the specific architecture of financial deception, the way a builder understands structural failure. When Marcus finished, Dominic set the papers down and looked at him directly. He told Marcus that what he was describing was wire fraud, premeditated, multi-party. The involvement of a registered LLC, a named third party, and a controlled separate account indicated that this had not been assembled quickly. This had been planned across months, possibly longer. Marcus asked him how long. Dominic told him that based on the LLC formation date, the minimum planning window was 14 months. But the actual ideation, the earliest conversations about how to execute something like this, could have begun significantly earlier. Marcus absorbed that without expression. He asked what his options were. Dominic outlined them clearly. A civil suit against Destiny for fraudulent misrepresentation and conversion of marital assets. A criminal referral to the Michigan Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit for wire fraud charges targeting Terrence Ockafer and potentially Destiny as a co-conspirator. Asset recovery proceedings if the funds could be traced to accessible accounts. Divorce proceedings running parallel, which would allow a family court to consider the fraud as a factor in asset division. Marcus sat with all of it. Then he asked a question Dominic had not expected. He asked whether there was any version of this in which Roosevelt Caldwell, the father-in-law, had known. Dominic paused. He said it was possible. He said the family structure of the deception, the use of a dying father as the emotional trigger, was a calculated choice. Whether Roosevelt had participated knowingly or had been used as an unwitting element was something investigators would need to determine. Marcus nodded once. He thought about Roosevelt, a man he had met at family gatherings, a man who had shaken his hand and called him son at his and Destiny's wedding in a small ceremony hall in Detroit, Michigan, 4 years earlier. He thought about what it meant that even that memory was now suspect. He thanked Dominic, confirmed the engagement for legal representation, and took the elevator down to the lobby. Outside Detroit, Michigan was cold and bright. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his coat pockets, before walking to his car. He drove home. He cooked dinner. He waited. He chose a Saturday. Not for any dramatic reason. Saturdays were when Destiny did not have work obligations, when there was no morning rush, no exit available under the cover of a schedule. Saturday meant the conversation would have nowhere to go except through itself to the end. Marcus set the documents on the living room table before she woke up. He organized them in the order of the story they told, beginning with the transfer confirmation and ending with the printed record of the account in her maiden name. He made coffee. He sat in the chair across from the couch, not beside her where he usually sat, and he waited. Destiny came out of the bedroom just after 9 in the morning in the unhurried way of a woman who believed her Saturday was ordinary. She saw him sitting in the chair and registered something in his posture, some quality of stillness that was different from his usual stillness, and she slowed. She looked at the table. Her eyes moved across the documents without touching them. She sat down on the couch. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. That silence was its own kind of confrontation. It was the silence of a man who no longer needed to be angry because the truth had already done the work. It was the silence of a woman who understood that the architecture she had built had been fully mapped. Marcus spoke first. His voice was level, not cold level. He told her he knew about Northgate Health Solutions. He told her he knew about Terence Ockhaffer. He told her he knew about the account registered in her maiden name and the 3 redistributed transfers. He told her he had an attorney and that the documentation had already been reviewed by someone who used the words wire fraud without hesitation. He told her he was not asking her to confess. He was giving her the opportunity to tell him the truth in her own words before a courtroom required it. Destiny looked at the documents on the table. Her face did not collapse immediately. That was the thing Marcus noticed most. She did not cry right away. She did not reach for him or reach for an excuse. She sat with the exposure for a long, visible moment, and Marcus understood in that moment that she was not deciding whether to admit it. She was deciding how much to admit. That calculation, happening behind her eyes in their living room in Detroit, Michigan, with $43,000 of his savings rooted through a shell company and sitting in her separate account, was the most painful thing he witnessed in the entirety of what followed. Not the fraud, not the lie, the calculation. He kept his hands flat on his knees and waited for her to speak. She started with the debt, not with an apology, not with his name. She started with a number, $61,000. That was what she said first, looking not at him but at a space slightly beside him, as if the truth were easier to address when it was not directly attached to a face. $61,000 was what she owed Terence Ockhaffer. Marcus did not respond. He let her continue. The debt, she said, had accumulated over 2 years before their current situation became critical. Terence was not a stranger. He was a man Destiny had been involved with financially before her marriage to Marcus, an informal loan arrangement that had grown into something she could not manage and could not tell Marcus about without dismantling the image of herself she had built inside their relationship. She described it as a corner she had painted herself into, a phrase Marcus recognized as the language of someone describing consequence without accepting responsibility. The interest on the debt had been Terence's design, not hers, she said. The terms had shifted. The pressure had increased. Terence had proposed the plan, the fake emergency, the dying father, the surgery fund. Destiny had brought the target and the emotional knowledge required to make it convincing. Terence had built the financial structure. Roosevelt, she said quietly, had not known. He had been genuinely ill with a manageable heart condition months earlier, and that real event had been the seed from which the fabricated crisis grew. Marcus sat with that. His father-in-law had been used the same way he had, as raw material. Destiny finally looked at him directly. She said she had told herself it was temporary. She had told herself she would find a way to replace the money before Marcus noticed anything was wrong. She had told herself that protecting their marriage from the truth of her debt was the same as protecting their marriage. Marcus listened to all of it. When she finished, the apartment in Detroit, Michigan was very quiet. Outside, the neighborhood was doing its ordinary Saturday things, distant music from somewhere, a car door closing, a child's voice. He asked her one question. He asked whether, at any point during the 11 years he had spent building those savings, during any of the doubled shifts and skipped vacations and dinners cooked at home, she had considered telling him. She did not answer immediately. Then she said she had considered it many times. He nodded. That answer was, in its own way, the most complete thing she had said since she sat down. Not because it was comforting, because it was honest. She had known. She had chosen repeatedly across years to protect the lie over him. The marriage had been a managed distance between who she was and who she had allowed him to believe she was. He stood up. He picked up his documents from the table, one by one, and placed them back into the folder Dominic Ashford had prepared. He did not slam it. He did not raise his voice. He walked to the bedroom, took the bag he had quietly packed 2 nights earlier, and carried it to the front door. He did not leave in anger. That was the thing Marcus Devereux would carry forward from that day in Detroit, Michigan, as something he had done right inside a situation that had gone completely wrong. He did not slam the door. He did not issue a final statement designed to wound. He simply walked out of the apartment with a packed bag and the folder under his arm, and he stood for a moment in the hallway, breathing the ordinary air of an ordinary building before taking the stairs down. He stayed with a colleague named Jerome for the first 2 weeks. Jerome asked no detailed questions and offered no dramatic sympathy. He gave Marcus a spare room, regular meals, and the kind of company that does not require explanation. That was exactly what Marcus needed. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, slowly, seriously, and without room for sentiment. Dominic Ashford filed the civil suit. The Michigan Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit opened a formal investigation into Northgate Health Solutions and Terrence Ockheffer. The fraudulent wire transfer, the LLC structure, the prepaid account routing, all of it formed the documented backbone of a case that Dominic described as strong. The divorce filing came 6 weeks after the Saturday conversation. Destiny did not contest it. The family court, informed of the financial fraud and the asset conversion, ruled in Marcus's favor on the question of marital property. The recovery of the full $43,000 would take time and would be partial, Dominic explained, depending on what remained accessible in the accounts. But the ruling gave Marcus the legal standing to pursue every available dollar, and he intended to use it. What the court could not return to him was the 11 years. He knew that. He had known it since the kitchen counter moment when he set his coffee down and crossed the room toward a woman who was performing grief she did not feel. He had known, somewhere beneath the knowing, that some costs do not get refunded. They only get survived. By the end of that year, Marcus had moved into a smaller apartment in a quieter part of Detroit, Michigan. He had rebuilt his budget from the bottom. He had opened a new savings account with the discipline of a man who understood, now at a cellular level, that the act of building something was not the same as the act of protecting it. He worked the same job. He took the same route in the morning. He drank his coffee while it was still hot. The lesson he carried was not about marriage. It was not even entirely about betrayal. It was about the specific danger of loving someone with your eyes closed, of offering trust as a gift so complete that it removed your own ability to see. Blind trust, he had learned, was not love. It was a vacancy, and vacancies in the wrong hands became opportunities. He was not bitter. Bitterness would have required him to stay in the story. Marcus had decided to move forward instead, one careful, eyes-open step at a time, building again what had been taken in the same city with the same hands, and this time with both eyes open. That was enough. That was, in the end, everything. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.